The stars had always been quiet for the Valorian Dominion. For over 10,000 years, they had spread across the galaxy like a dark wave, swallowing world after world. 300 star systems bowed to their rule. Countless species had been conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. The Valorians knew only one truth. They were the masters of all they surveyed. High Commander Xyroth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and studied the data on the screen before him. His gray skin reflected the blue glow of the displays. His 4 eyes narrowed as he read the report from the deep space probe. "A new world," he said, his voice deep and cold. "They call it Earth." His second-in-command, Fleet Captain Morath, stepped closer. The probe captured their communications. "High Commander. They appear to be a young species. They have only recently developed space travel. Their fastest ships cannot even approach light speed." Xyroth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Primitive. How many ships do they have? Our intelligence suggests they have a small fleet. Perhaps 12 to 15 vessels. They use them mostly for peacekeeping between their own nations. They are not united under a single government. Fragmented and weak," Xyroth said. He turned to face the wide viewport that showed the endless stars. "We will add them to the Dominion. Prepare a standard subjugation fleet. 40 warships should be more than enough for such a primitive species." "At once, High Commander." The Valorian fleet assembled within 3 days. 40 massive warships, each one capable of destroying a small moon, jumped through hyperspace toward the distant blue planet called Earth. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. The news talked about politics and sports and weather. No one knew that death was coming from the stars. The United Nations Space Defense Force was a small organization. It had been created 20 years ago, when humanity first began to explore beyond their own moon. Its purpose was simple: keep the peace between nations in space and protect Earth from any potential threats. Most people thought the second part was a joke. After all, no one really believed in aliens. Captain Jack Morrison commanded the UNS Defiance, the flagship of the peacekeeping fleet. He was a tall man with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had served in space for 15 years, and he had never fired a weapon in anger. He hoped he never would. That hope died on a Tuesday morning. "Captain," shouted Lieutenant Amy Chen from her sensor station. "We have contacts. Multiple contacts. They just appeared near the lunar perimeter." Morrison set down his coffee and walked to her station. "How many?" Chen's face had gone pale. 40, sir. 40 ships. And they're big. Much bigger than anything we have." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at their screens, hoping this was some kind of mistake. It was not. "Open a channel," Morrison ordered. "All frequencies." The communication officer, Ensign Bobby Grant, worked his console. "Channel open, sir." Morrison took a deep breath. "Unidentified vessels. This is Captain Jack Morrison of the United Nations Space Defense Force. You have entered Earth's sovereign space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came seconds later. The alien's voice was translated by their systems, but it still sounded wrong, like metal scraping against metal. "I am High Commander Xyroth of the Valorian Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately. Your people will serve the Dominion. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Morrison felt his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around at his crew. They were scared. He was scared too. But he was also a soldier. "All ships," he said, his voice steady. "Battle stations." The 12 ships of the peacekeeping fleet moved into defensive positions near the moon. They were small and fast, designed more for patrol duties than actual combat. Against 40 Valorian warships, they had no chance of winning. Morrison knew this, but he also knew they had to try. "Sir," Chen said quietly. Morrison looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were moving toward them in a standard attack formation. They were confident. They expected an easy victory. We show them what humans are made of, Morrison said. All ships, engage. The battle began with fire and light. Human ships darted between the larger Valorian vessels, striking at their weak points and then retreating before they could be targeted. The Valorians had superior firepower, but the humans were faster and more creative. The UNS Valor, commanded by Captain Sarah Brooks, led a daring attack on a Valorian cruiser. Her ship took heavy damage, but she managed to destroy the enemy's engine core, sending it spinning into another Valorian ship. 2 kills with 1 strike. The UNS Thunder, under Captain Mike Lopez, used the moon's gravity to slingshot behind enemy lines and attack their supply ships. The explosion lit up the darkness of space. For 3 hours, the small human fleet fought with everything they had. They lost 6 ships. They killed 9 of the enemy. Finally, Morrison gave the order to retreat. His ship was damaged. Half his crew was injured. They had done everything they could. Fall back to Earth orbit, he commanded. Protect the planet. High Commander Zyroth watched the human ships retreat. He had expected to destroy them in minutes. Instead, they had cost him 9 warships and damaged many more. He was impressed, but only slightly. Interesting, he said to Morath. They fight better than expected, but it changes nothing. Send a surrender demand to their planet. The message was broadcast to all of Earth. Every screen, every radio, every device carried the words of High Commander Zyroth. People of Earth, your fleet has been defeated. Your defenses have fallen. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you refuse, we will begin destroying your cities, one by one, until you comply. This is your only warning. The world watched in terror. Leaders scrambled to respond. Panic spread through the streets. In Geneva, at Earth Defense Command, Admiral Laura Price sat in her command chair and listened to the alien's message. She was an older woman, with gray hair and a face that had seen too many wars. She had commanded navies and won battles that most people would never know about. She knew something the aliens did not. Her aide, Commander Greg Palmer, stood beside her. Admiral, what do we do? They destroyed half our fleet. Admiral Price smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. No, she said calmly. They destroyed half of our peacekeeping force. That's not our fleet. Palmer stared at her. Ma'am, open a channel to the alien commander. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. The channel opened. Admiral Price stood and faced the screen. In the distance, the Valorian fleet waited for Earth's surrender. High Commander Zyroth, she said, her voice cold and hard. I am Admiral Laura Price of the Earth Defense Coalition. I have received your message. I have a response for you. She paused. You attacked our peacekeeping ships. You killed our people. You threatened our world. And now, you demand our surrender. Her eyes narrowed. You've made a terrible mistake. That wasn't our army. That wasn't even close to our army. And now you're going to find out what happens when you make humanity angry. Number that, Andau. She cut the channel. On his bridge, High Commander Zyroth felt something he had not felt in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was fear. The world had changed in a single day. The old arguments between nations suddenly seemed foolish. The old wars seemed pointless. For the first time in human history, every person on Earth looked up at the sky and saw the same enemy. Admiral Laura Price stood before the emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Leaders from every nation watched her through screens and holograms. The room was silent. Everyone was afraid. Ladies and gentlemen, Price began. 12 hours ago, an alien fleet attacked our peacekeeping force near the moon. We lost 6 ships and over 400 brave men and women. The enemy lost 9 ships. They now demand our complete surrender. The President of the United States, a man named Richard Cole, leaned forward. Admiral, can we fight them? Do we have the resources? Price allowed herself a small smile. Mr. President, that is exactly what I wanted to talk about. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed Earth, and around it, dozens of red dots, representing the Valorian fleet. Then, one by one, blue dots began to appear. They came from the far side of the moon. They came from bases hidden in asteroid fields. They came from secret facilities on Mars and in the depths of space. The room fell silent as the blue dots kept appearing. 10, 20, 50, 100, 200, 300. What you are seeing, Price said, is the true military strength of Earth. For the past 50 years, every major nation has been building ships in secret. We did this because we were afraid of each other. We thought we might one day fight the greatest war in human history. She paused and looked at the leaders watching her. We were right. We just didn't know who the enemy would be. The Chinese premier, a woman named Lu Wei, spoke first. The Dragon's Eye fleet is ready. We have been hiding them in facilities on the dark side of the moon. 62 warships, fully armed and crewed. The Russian president, Viktor Petrov, nodded slowly. The Siberian Defense Armada stands ready as well. 48 ships. We built them in underground facilities beneath the ice. One by one, the leaders revealed their hidden forces. The United States had the Atlantic Fleet's orbital division with 55 ships. The European Union had the Continental Guard with 38 vessels. Japan, India, Brazil, and others added their own secret fleets. In total, humanity had 312 warships hidden across the solar system. Ships that no one had known about. Ships built for a war that everyone had feared but hoped would never come. Admiral Price looked at the display. The enemy thinks they defeated our entire military. They think we are weak and primitive. They are wrong. On his flagship, High Commander Xyroth was growing impatient. The hour he had given the humans had passed. He was preparing to give the order to begin destroying cities when his sensor officer shouted in alarm. High Commander, new contacts. Many new contacts. Xyroth turned to look at the display. His 4 eyes went wide. Blue signatures were appearing all across the star system. They came from behind the moon. They emerged from the asteroid belt. They rose from the red surface of Mars. More and more ships, appearing like ghosts from the darkness. How many? Xyroth demanded. The sensor officer's voice trembled. Over 300, High Commander. And more are appearing. Morath stepped closer, his gray face pale with shock. That's impossible. Our intelligence said they had only 12 ships. Your intelligence was wrong, Xyroth growled. He stared at the display as the human fleet continued to grow. He had brought 40 ships. The humans now had nearly 10 times that number. On Earth, the mood had shifted from fear to something else. In cities around the world, people gathered in the streets. They watched the news feeds, showing their hidden fleets emerging from the darkness. They saw ships with names like the USS Constitution, the HMS Sovereign, the Dragon's Fury, and the Moscow's Pride. For the first time in human history, every nation stood together against a common enemy. Admiral Price took command of the Unified Earth Defense Coalition from her headquarters in Geneva. Her first order was simple. Surround the enemy, but do not attack yet. We want them to understand what they're facing, she told her commanders. We want them to feel fear. The human fleet moved into position. The Valorians found themselves surrounded on all sides. Their 40 ships, which had seemed so powerful hours ago, now looked small and weak. While the fleets faced each other, Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen led a special mission. She took a small team to the wreckage of the destroyed Valorian ships near the moon. Their job was to learn everything they could about the enemy. Chen and her team boarded the remains of a Valorian cruiser. The ship was dark and cold, filled with the bodies of alien soldiers. Chen ignored the death around her and focused on her mission. Download everything from their computers, she ordered. Weapons, shields, communications. I want to know how they think and how they fight. Her team worked quickly. Within hours, they had recovered massive amounts of data. The information was sent back to Earth, where the smartest scientists and engineers in the world began to analyze it. The discovery came from a young scientist named Peter Kim. He was studying the Valorian shield technology when he noticed something strange. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, he explained to Admiral Price. Lasers, plasma, that kind of thing. But they're weak against kinetic impacts. Physical objects, Price understood immediately. You mean missiles? Bullets? Railguns? Yes, ma'am. Things that actually hit them. Their shields can barely stop them, Price smiled. Humanity had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of throwing things at their enemies. From rocks to arrows to bullets to missiles. It was what humans did best. She issued new orders to the fleet. All ships, load kinetic weapons. Missiles, railguns, everything we have. The enemy has a weakness, and we're going to use it. High Commander Xyroth watched the human fleet with growing dread. He had sent a message to the Dominion Council, requesting reinforcements, but help was weeks away. He had to survive until then. They haven't attacked yet, Morath observed. Why? Xyroth shook his head. I don't know. Perhaps they are still organizing. Perhaps they are waiting for something. He looked at the hundreds of human ships surrounding his fleet. He had conquered dozens of species. He had never lost a battle. But something about these humans was different. They were small and weak compared to Valorians. Their technology was primitive, and yet, they had hidden an entire war fleet from his intelligence officers. They had fought his ships with skill and courage. They had surprised him at every turn. What kind of species are they? He muttered. He would soon find out. On Earth, Admiral Price addressed her fleet commanders one final time before the battle began. The enemy came to our home, she said. They threatened our families. They demanded our freedom. Tomorrow, we give them our answer. She paused and looked at each commander in turn. We didn't start this war. But we're going to finish it. Whatever it takes. Whatever the cost. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will fight until the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath. Her voice hardened. And when this is over, the galaxy will know the truth about humanity. We are not weak. We are not primitive. We are the most dangerous species they will ever meet. The commanders saluted. The fleet prepared for battle. And in the cold darkness of space, surrounded by enemies he had underestimated, High Commander Xyroth finally understood the terrible mistake he had made. He had poked a sleeping giant. And now, that giant was awake. The asteroid belt stretched across the solar system like a river of broken worlds. Millions of rocks, some as small as houses and others as large as mountains, floated in the endless darkness between Mars and Jupiter. It was here that Admiral Laura Price chose to make her stand. Her plan was simple but bold. She divided the human fleet into 3 battle groups. Each group had a specific mission. Each mission was dangerous. But together, they would crush the enemy. Battle Group Alpha was the largest. It contained 120 ships under the command of Captain Nathan Drake. Drake was a former fighter pilot who had risen through the ranks through skill and courage. He had never lost a battle, and he didn't plan to start now. Alpha Group, Price said during the final briefing. Your job is to hit them head on. Make them focus on you. Make them think you're our main attack. Said. Drake nodded. We'll keep them busy. Admiral. Battle Group Beta was smaller but faster. Commander Megan Torres led 60 ships on a long journey around Mars. Her mission was to come up behind the enemy when they were focused on Drake's forces. Torres was young for a commander, only 32 years old. But she had a sharp mind and a talent for tactics. We'll hit them where they're not looking, she promised. Battle Group Gamma had the hardest job. Captain Ryan Scott and his 40 ships would position themselves beyond the asteroid belt, cutting off the enemy's escape route. When the Valorians tried to run, Scott would be waiting. No one leaves, Price told him. Not a single ship. Scott was a quiet man who rarely smiled. Understood, Admiral. They'll have to go through us. The battle began at dawn. Earth time. Not that time meant much in space, but humans liked their traditions. It felt right to start the fight with the rising sun. Captain Drake led his fleet toward the Valorian position. The enemy ships turned to face them, their weapons powering up. High Commander Xyroth stood on his bridge, watching the human approach. "They're attacking," Morath said with surprise. "They actually think they can win." Xyroth said nothing. He had learned to stop underestimating these creatures. "All ships, prepare for combat. Show them the power of the Dominion." The two fleets met in a storm of fire and metal. Valorian energy weapons lit up the darkness, their beams burning through space. Human ships answered with missiles and railgun rounds, thousands of metal projectiles screaming through the void. The Valorians were shocked. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, flickered and failed under the impact of human kinetic weapons. A railgun round, traveling at a fraction of the speed of light, hit a Valorian cruiser and tore through its hull like paper. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. "What is happening?" Xyroth demanded. "Why are our shields failing?" No one had an answer. The Valorians had never faced an enemy that fought like this. They had conquered species that used lasers and plasma and particle beams. No one had ever attacked them with simple pieces of metal. But humans had been throwing things at their enemies since the first cave dweller picked up a rock. They had perfected the art of kinetic warfare, and now the Valorians were learning just how deadly a simple piece of metal could be. Captain Drake pushed his fleet forward, taking losses but dealing far more damage in return. His ship, the UNS Thunderbolt, led every charge. He was everywhere at once, shouting orders and encouragement to his crews. "Keep firing," he yelled. "Don't let them breathe. Show them what we're made of." The battle raged for hours. Ships on both sides burned and died. But slowly, the humans were winning. Then Commander Torres arrived. Her battle group Beta emerged from behind Mars, just as the Valorians were fully committed to fighting Drake's forces. 60 human ships appeared on their sensors, coming fast from an unexpected direction. "New contacts," the Valorian sensor officer screamed. "They're behind us." Xyroth spun around. His fleet was caught between two human forces. He had to make a choice: keep fighting Drake or turn to face Torres. Either way, he would be exposed to attack. "Split our forces," he ordered. Half turn to face the new threat. Half continue engaging the main fleet. It was the wrong decision. By splitting his fleet, Xyroth weakened both halves. Torres tore into his rear guard with ruthless efficiency. Her ships were smaller and faster. Designed for exactly this kind of attack, they darted between the larger Valorian vessels, striking at engines and weapons systems. The Valorians were not used to fighting on two fronts. Their formations broke down. Ships crashed into each other. Commanders screamed for orders that never came. In the middle of the chaos, Colonel Kevin Park led the first human boarding party in history. His team of 50 Marines landed on a disabled Valorian cruiser that was drifting near the asteroid field. Their mission was to capture the ship and take prisoners for questioning. Park was a small man with a big heart. He had trained his Marines for years, preparing them for a fight against human enemies. Now, they were about to face something much stranger. The interior of the Valorian ship was hot and humid. The air smelled wrong, like rotting plants and burning metal. Park's Marines moved through the dark corridors, their weapons ready. They found Valorian soldiers waiting for them. The aliens were tall, with gray skin and 4 eyes. They carried energy weapons that glowed with blue light. They thought they would easily kill the small, weak humans who had invaded their ship. They were wrong. The first Valorian fired at Park. The energy bolt would have killed a normal creature. But humans had developed powerful armor over their years of fighting each other. The bolt splashed harmlessly against Park's chest plate. Park shot the alien 3 times. It fell and did not get up. "Move forward," Park shouted. "Room by room. Take no chances." The battle inside the ship was brutal. The Valorians were stronger than humans, but the humans were faster and more adaptable. The aliens fought in straight lines. Following their training exactly, the humans improvised, using cover and teamwork and tricks that the Valorians had never seen. One Valorian soldier cornered a young Marine named Danny Green. The alien towered over the human. confident in its strength. It reached for Danny's throat. Danny ducked under the grab, pulled out a knife, and stabbed the alien in what he hoped was a vital spot. The Valorian screamed and fell. Danny had guessed right. "Their weak point is under the arms," Danny shouted to his teammates. "Hit them there." Within an hour, the ship was secured. Park and his Marines had killed or captured every Valorian on board. They had lost only 3 of their own people. It was an incredible victory, but the battle in space was still raging. High Commander Xyroth finally realized he could not win this fight. His fleet had lost 23 ships. 8 more had been captured or disabled. His remaining vessels were scattered and disorganized. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice bitter with shame. "All ships, retreat to the outer system." The Valorian ships tried to run. They turned and accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, hoping to escape and regroup. Captain Ryan Scott was waiting for them. Battle Group Gamma appeared directly in their path. 40 human ships, fresh and ready, blocked the only escape route. The Valorians were trapped. "Surrender," Scott broadcast to the fleeing ships. "Power down your weapons and surrender. Or die." Some of the Valorian captains chose to fight. They died quickly. Others, seeing no hope, powered down their weapons and waited. For the first time in Dominion history, Valorian warships surrendered to a supposedly inferior species. When the battle ended, the humans had lost 41 ships and thousands of brave soldiers. But the Valorians had lost far more. Their fleet was destroyed. Their commander was humiliated, and word of their defeat was already spreading across the galaxy. Admiral Price surveyed the aftermath from her command center in Geneva. She felt no joy. War never brought joy. But she felt pride in her people, in what they had achieved against impossible odds. "This isn't over," she said quietly to her staff. "They'll come back. With more ships. More soldiers. We need to be ready." She was right. Far across the galaxy, the Dominion Council was already planning their response, and it would be unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The Dominion Council chamber was the largest room in the known galaxy. It was built into an asteroid the size of a small moon, hollowed out and filled with golden light. Here, the 12 lords of the Valorian Dominion made decisions that affected trillions of lives across 300 star systems. Today, they were angry. "A primitive species," growled Lord Varketh, the oldest member of the council, "barely capable of leaving their own planet. And they destroyed our fleet?" High Commander Xyroth stood before them, his head bowed in shame. He had survived the battle, retreating with the few ships that remained. Now he had to explain his failure to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "They were stronger than we expected," Xyroth said. "They had hidden their true military strength. Our intelligence was wrong." "Your intelligence was wrong," corrected Lord Pyrith, a female Valorian with eyes like burning coals. "You were in command. The failure is yours." Xyroth accepted the insult in silence. He had no defense. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to forget about Earth and focus on other conquests. The humans were too dangerous, they argued. Too unpredictable. Let them have their little planet. But Lord Varketh would not accept this. The Dominion had never retreated from a conquest. If they showed weakness now, other species might rebel. The Empire could collapse. "We send everything," Varketh declared. "The Grand Armada. 500 warships. Every soldier we can spare. We will crush these humans and make an example of them." The council agreed. The order was given. Across the Dominion, ships began to gather. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. On Earth, the celebration of victory was short-lived. Admiral Price received intelligence reports from the captured Valorian ships and prisoners. What she learned made her blood run cold. 500 ships, she told her commanders at the War Council. "They're sending 500 ships. We barely defeated 40. The room fell silent. Even the most optimistic officers understood what this meant. They could not win a defensive war against those numbers. No matter how brave they were, no matter how hard they fought, 500 warships would eventually overwhelm them. Captain Nathan Drake spoke first. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to hit them first. Before they're ready, Commander Megan Torres shook her head. Hit them with what? We don't have enough ships for an offensive strike. And even if we did, how would we get to them? Their home system is hundreds of light years away. This was the problem that haunted everyone. Human ships were slow. The fastest could only travel at a fraction of light speed. It would take years to reach Valorian space. By then, the Grand Armada would have already destroyed Earth, but there was another option. Lieutenant Chris Walker was a young tactical officer who had spent the past 5 years working on a secret project. He was nervous as he stood before the War Council, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "We have faster-than-light drives," he said. "Prototype technology. We developed it in secret, hoping to use it for exploration. It's never been tested in combat." Admiral Price leaned forward. "Explain." Walker activated a holographic display. The drives create a bubble of bent space around the ship. Inside the bubble, the ship isn't actually moving faster than light, but to everyone outside, it looks like instant teleportation. We can cross hundreds of light years in seconds. "Why wasn't I told about this?" Price demanded. "The technology is unstable, Admiral. The drives have a tendency to explode. We've lost 3 test ships already. We weren't sure they were safe enough to use." Price looked at the display. She understood what Walker was suggesting. It was insane. It was suicidal. And it might be their only chance. "If we can get ships behind the Armada," she said slowly, "we could attack them before they reach Earth. Hit them when they're not expecting it." Walker nodded. "Yes, ma'am. But the pilots would be taking an enormous risk. The drives might fail. They might end up scattered across the galaxy. They might die before they fire a single shot." The room was silent. Everyone understood what this meant. They were asking soldiers to volunteer for what might be a one-way mission. Captain Katie Marshall stood up. She was a short woman with red hair and a fierce temper. She had commanded the UNS Relentless for 3 years, and her crew would follow her into hell. "I'll go," she said. "My ship and my crew. We'll test your drives and hit the enemy where it hurts." Other commanders stood as well. Within an hour, 20 ships had volunteered for the mission. 20 crews willing to risk everything to save their world. Admiral Price approved the mission. The prototype drives were installed on the volunteer ships. Final preparations were made. Families said goodbye to loved ones, not knowing if they would ever see them again. Captain Marshall addressed her crew before they departed. "I won't lie to you," she said. "This mission is dangerous. Some of us might not come back. But if we succeed, we'll give Earth a chance. We'll show the Dominion that they can never be safe from us. No matter how far they run, no matter where they hide, humanity will find them." Her crew cheered. Fear was replaced by determination. They were ready. The 20 ships activated their drives simultaneously. Space itself seemed to scream as reality bent around them. Then, in a flash of light, they were gone. They emerged in the middle of the Grand Armada. The Valorian ships were gathered in formation, preparing for their final journey to Earth. They never expected an attack here, in the heart of Dominion space. Their shields were down. Their weapons were inactive. They were completely vulnerable. Captain Marshall's voice rang out across all frequencies. "All ships, fire everything." The human ships opened fire with every weapon they had. Missiles streaked toward Valorian command vessels. Railgun rounds tore through supply ships. Explosions bloomed across the formation like flowers of fire. The Valorians panicked. Ships crashed into each other as they tried to maneuver. Commanders screamed for orders. No one knew what was happening or where the attack was coming from. High Commander Zyroth was aboard his new flagship when the attack began. He watched in horror as the human ships appeared from nowhere and tore through his fleet. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "How did they get here?" No one could answer. The Valorians had believed they were the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had never imagined that primitive humans could develop technology beyond their understanding. Captain Marshall led her ships on a devastating rampage through the Armada. They targeted command vessels, communication ships, and supply transports, anything that would disrupt the enemy's ability to fight as a unit. The UNS Relentless took heavy damage during the attack. Fires burned through the lower decks. Half the crew was injured. But Marshall refused to retreat. "Keep firing," she ordered. "Don't stop until they're running." After 20 minutes of chaos, the human ships activated their drives again and vanished. They left behind over 60 destroyed Valorian ships and dozens more damaged. The Grand Armada was in ruins. Back on Earth, Admiral Price received the report with tears in her eyes. The mission had succeeded beyond anyone's hopes. 18 of the 20 ships had survived and returned home, but the war was not over. The Grand Armada still existed. It was wounded and weakened, but it was still coming. 389 ships continued their journey toward Earth. High Commander Xyroth was dead, killed when his flagship was destroyed in the attack. But the Armada had a new commander now, Sub-Admiral Vithos. He was younger than Xyroth, and even more ruthless. "We will destroy them," Vithos swore as his fleet continued toward the human homeworld. Every human, every city, every trace of their species. They will pay for what they have done. On Earth, Admiral Price prepared for the final battle. The human fleet gathered in orbit, 312 ships ready to defend their home. They were still outnumbered, but the gap had closed. More importantly, they had something the Valorians did not: hope. They had proven that they could hurt the enemy. They had proven that they could fight and win against impossible odds. "This is it," Price told her commanders. "Everything we have been building toward, everything we have sacrificed, it all comes down to this." She looked out at the stars, where the enemy fleet was approaching like a dark wave. "May God have mercy on us all, because we're going to show none to them." Earth hung in the darkness of space like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile. Around it, 312 human warships waited in formation. Below them, 8 billion people watched their screens and held their breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. Admiral Laura Price stood on the bridge of the UNS Unity, the newly constructed flagship of the Earth Defense Coalition. She was 63 years old, and she had never felt more tired. But she could not rest. Not yet. Not until this was over. "Admiral," her aide reported, "the enemy fleet has entered the solar system. They'll reach Earth in 6 hours. Price nodded. "All ships, prepare for combat. This is what we've been waiting for." Sub-Admiral Vithos led the Grand Armada toward Earth with fury in his heart. His fleet had been humiliated by the surprise attack. 60 ships destroyed. Dozens more damaged. The great High Commander Xyroth killed like a common soldier. But Vithos still had 389 warships under his command. More than enough to destroy the human fleet and burn their planet to ashes. "Today we avenge our fallen," he announced to his captains. "Today we show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Dominion." The two fleets met in the orbit of Neptune, far from Earth. Admiral Price had chosen this location carefully. She wanted to keep the fighting as far from her homeworld as possible. The battle began with fire. Valorian energy weapons carved through the darkness. Human missiles and railgun rounds answered in kind. Ships on both sides exploded and burned. Within the first hour, 30 vessels had been destroyed. Captain Nathan Drake led Battle Group Alpha into the heart of the enemy formation. His ship, the UNS Thunderbolt, had been repaired since the last battle. Its hull was covered in patches and welds, but its weapons were as deadly as ever. "Stay tight," Drake ordered his captains. "Watch each other's backs. Hit them hard and keep moving." 2. Drake ordered his captains. Drake's group fought like demons. They destroyed Valorian ships with ruthless efficiency, using the tactics they had learned in the first battle. But the enemy had learned too. The Valorians had adjusted their shields to better resist kinetic weapons. They had developed new formations to protect their flanks. The battle became a grinding struggle of attrition. Both sides took heavy losses. Neither gained a clear advantage. Commander Megan Torres led Battle Group Beta on a flanking maneuver around the enemy formation. Her ships were smaller and faster, designed for quick strikes rather than sustained combat. But today, she had a different mission. "There," she said, pointing at the tactical display. "The Valorian command ship. That's where their sub-admiral is coordinating the battle. If we take that ship, we break their command structure." Her fleet punched through the Valorian perimeter and raced toward the enemy flagship. Valorian ships moved to intercept, but Torres was too fast. Her vessels weaved through enemy fire with impossible grace. The UNS Horizon, Torres's ship, pulled alongside the Valorian flagship. Instead of firing, Torres gave a different order. "Boarding parties, go." 300 human Marines launched across the gap between ships. They cut through the hull with plasma torches and stormed inside. Leading them was Colonel Kevin Park, the same man who had captured the first Valorian ship weeks ago. "Move fast," Park told his soldiers. "Find their commander. Take him alive if possible." The fighting inside the flagship was brutal. Valorian soldiers fought desperately to defend their leader. Human Marines pushed forward through corridors filled with smoke and fire. Park led the charge toward the bridge. He fought through a dozen Valorians, using his rifle and his knife and his bare hands when he had to. Nothing could stop him. Nothing would stop him. He kicked open the door to the bridge and found Sub-Admiral Vithos waiting for him. The Valorian commander was tall and proud, with 4 eyes that burned with hatred. "You think capturing me will end this war?" Vithos said. "More fleets will come. More soldiers. We will never stop until your species is extinct." Park pointed his rifle at the alien's chest. "Maybe, but you won't be around to see it." Vithos surrendered. The Valorian flagship was captured, and without their commander, the enemy fleet began to fall apart. Back in the main battle, Captain Drake saw his opportunity. "All ships, press the attack. They're breaking." The human fleet surged forward. Ships that had been fighting defensively now became hunters. Valorian vessels fled in every direction. Their formations shattered. But the Valorians had one more surprise. A massive ship emerged from behind the enemy fleet. It was twice the size of any other vessel, covered in weapons and armor. This was the Dominion's Planet Killer, a weapon designed to destroy entire worlds. "They're going to fire on Earth," someone shouted on the Unity's bridge. Admiral Price made an instant decision. "All ships, stop that weapon, whatever it takes." Captain Drake was closest. He turned the Thunderbolt toward the Planet Killer and accelerated to maximum speed. His crew knew what he was planning. None of them tried to stop him. "It's been an honor," Drake said to his bridge crew. Then he opened a channel to the fleet. "Admiral, I'm going to give you an opening. Make it count." The Thunderbolt slammed into the Planet Killer at full speed. The collision tore through the massive ship's armor, destroying its main weapon systems. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness like a second sun. Nathan Drake died instantly. He never felt any pain, but his sacrifice gave the human fleet the time they needed. Without the Planet Killer, the Valorians had lost their greatest advantage. The remaining enemy ships began to surrender or flee. The battle raged for 18 hours in total. When it finally ended, the Valorian Grand Armada had been destroyed. Only 63 enemy ships survived, and they fled toward deep space as fast as their engines could carry them. The human fleet had lost 147 ships. Thousands of brave men and women had given their lives. But Earth was safe. Admiral Price stood on the bridge of the Unity and watched the last enemy ships disappear into the darkness. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion and grief for all those who had died. A communication request appeared on her screen. It was from one of the captured Valorian ships. She accepted. Sub-Admiral Vithos appeared on the screen, his hands bound, surrounded by human guards. His arrogance was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like respect. "How?" he asked, his voice quiet. "How did you do this? You were supposed to be primitive, weak. How did you hide such strength?" Price looked at the alien for a long moment. Then she spoke. What you fought first was our peacekeeping force, a few ships we built to keep ourselves from fighting each other. What you fought today was what we built because we were afraid of ourselves. The weapons we created to destroy each other in case we ever went to war." She paused. "You should be grateful you never saw what we would have built if we knew you were coming." Vithos said nothing. There was nothing to say. The war was over. Earth had won. In the months that followed, humanity began to change. The secret fleets were no longer secret. The nations of Earth, which had feared each other for so long, now worked together toward common goals. A new government formed. The United Earth Coalition, dedicated to protecting humanity and exploring the stars. The Valorian Dominion, humiliated and weakened, agreed to a peace treaty. They gave up all claims to Earth and its surrounding systems. They paid reparations for their attack. And they warned other species in the galaxy. Do not provoke the humans. Years later, Ambassador Daniel Grant represented humanity at the Galactic Council. It was a gathering of dozens of species, all of whom had heard stories about the humans who had defeated the mighty Dominion. A delegate from an aggressive species challenged Grant. "Why should we give you a seat on this council? Your species is small. Your territory is tiny. What gives you the right to be here?" Grant smiled. He had heard this question many times. "Our population is indeed small," he said, "and our territory is modest. But I would like to remind this council of something the Valorians learned the hard way." The chamber fell silent. Every delegate leaned forward to hear. "We have never actually shown anyone our full army. The Valorians saw our peacekeeping ships and thought they had won. Then they saw our hidden fleets and thought they understood us. But they never saw what we were truly capable of. No one has." He paused. "And if we are all very fortunate, no one ever will." The delegate who had challenged him sat back down. No one else spoke. Outside the chamber, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere among them, humanity was building new ships, exploring new worlds, growing stronger every day. They had come to the galaxy as a primitive species, underestimated and dismissed. They were leaving it as something very different. They were leaving it as the species that no one would ever underestimate again.